Now, as time progressed in the dream, I was given the ability to realize by being in homes that television sets not only broadcast and transmitted programming, but they now had the capacity to actually send signals about you in your living room. I was able to see that television sets were actually watching people in their homes, monitoring their movements, monitoring their conversations. That the television didn't even have to be on, it just needed to be plugged in. Guess what I found out? That televisions made after 1992 can in fact watch you.
More than just bringing you your favorite shows, it may be watching and recording your every move. 9 on your side, Scott Wagoner tells us this smart TV has some people worried.
Since the late 1940s, families have gathered around the television set to watch their favorite shows. But now, in 2015, it appears the television is watching back. It's Samsung's Smart TV. It collects this information through a camera aimed at the viewer and microphones that pick up your conversation.
We should absolutely be concerned about this.
UC journalism professor Jeff Blevins advises you to read the small print.
Oftentimes, I think we're not aware of exactly what it is that we're giving away or what the consequence of that might be.
Samsung says the technology is designed to respond to your preferences. It can find your favorite shows, connect you to services it thinks you would like, and allows you to change its function with a wave of your hand.
Some very unusual things began to happen almost immediately. Crops began to perish, droughts and famine. I was able to see all over the globe the most fertile areas, the most fertile farming areas. I lived at the time of this dream in the most fertile farming area in the whole world. Places that were once fertile were now arid deserts.
Historic drought continues to take a toll on California's farmland, and today millions learned they won't be receiving any water from the state.
A healthy and full lake in Northern California. There's only one problem. This picture is 3 years old. And now I'm walking on top of that very same bridge. Take a look. It is a virtual desert. This is what drought looks like in the state of California.
On a farm in Rio de Janeiro state, healthy green corn stalks are disappearing. Brazil's worst drought in 80 years.
This is the first time it's been like this. We've had droughts in the region before, but nothing like this. This is the first drought we've had here, which has been really very difficult.
The San Joaquin Valley of California. These areas were totally destroyed with drought and famine.
And wind gusts topping 50 miles an hour. Across Northern California, with smoke and flames visible from Disneyland, at least 24 structures burned to the ground.
And literally, this just went up in seconds.
Many more were threatened.
An unprecedented wildfire battle unfolding in Southern California.
Underway for Bryce Canyon Park, an area of Burbank.
We're moving into a recovery phase. Identification is going to be hard. We have found bodies that were almost completely intact, and we have found bodies that were nothing more than ash and bones.
Hundreds are still missing or unaccounted for. The massive scale of the disaster was expressed in a surreal image, a mail truck with nothing but rubble.
It was almost hard to comprehend what I was seeing, and it was almost immediate. It was almost like somebody just took things and twisted the whole order. The thing that I tell you that was strange to me is that weather seemed to have its own mind. I don't know how that would work, but I've heard some things from different people in the Prophecy Club about different issues, about how they're manipulating weather. But this weather was manipulated by the earth being shook from its axis.
Talking about climate change yesterday, and now we're learning that scientists and researchers are looking at how to change the weather on purpose. That's right. Lasers now could one day manipulate rain and lightning. See, lasers really to change the weather?
That's right. Well, as we physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts. This is potentially a game changer. However, for floods, for agriculture, farmers, for people planning wedding parties, football games, you name it, outdoor events and agriculture and flooding and even hurricanes. All of them could be subject to weather modification.
Incredibly interesting.
With the anomalous hurricanes currently ravaging the Americas, floods destroying India, and wildfires destroying the Pacific Northwest, weather warfare is a topic on the public consciousness right now.
This year marks the worst drought America's seen in decades, and it's showing no signs of letting up. Over half the country has been affected, with the brunt bearing down on the mid and southwest, especially Nebraska, Kansas, the Dakotas, and parts of the South. Just look at that. Well, in one hard-hit area of Texas, some people have grown tired of waiting for Mother Nature to bring relief and have decided to try and take matters into their own hands.
Craig Funky is flying me to the edge of a violent thunderstorm. He's a cloud seeder, chasing this menacing storm to squeeze out extra rain for the drought-stricken farmland below. This is Craig's job, firing chemicals into the clouds in a controversial attempt to modify the weather. He's literally a rainmaker.
That dark, thick cloud over there has lots of moisture in it.
That's part of the cloud that was seeded. It actually looks heavy with rain.
Cloud seeding has been used around the world for decades, but it's now getting a closer look as farmers desperate for solutions endure their 4th month of record-shattering drought with no end in sight. It's actually the largest drought in half a century, responsible for rising food prices and record wildfires. It's even suspected to be a cause for the recent surge in cases of West Nile virus.
This was very unusual. This destruction was global. It reached the whole globe, folks. This earthquake that hit caused a massive change in weather patterns. At this moment, what began to happen was the normal weather patterns completely changed. The patterns for winter became summer, summer became winter, and you might have a day of snow and a day of heat. The world was in total chaos in its weather patterns. Predicting weather was totally impossible. It was just useless to try to forecast weather. Predictions did not work.
State water officials are painting a bleak outlook after measuring the snowpack in the Sierra Mountains. The worst part is one of San Diego's main water sources.
You may have noticed I'm wearing short sleeves in the dead of winter. That's because it is hotter and drier than ever before.
January should have been the wettest month, but the supply fell back to 1/4.
The earth being shook from its axis. You say, how do you know that? I was above it and I saw it shaking. I saw the whole earth rocking around like it was a drunk person trying to walk. It was very, very frightening to me.
A supervolcano waking up in the USA. A supervolcano, which in case of eruption will blow all of North America and doom about half of the world to slow death, is starting to wake up. Can't we do anything about it? First, let's decide on what is a supervolcano. It's nothing like a regular volcano, a cone-shaped formation with a vent. It's more of a huge depression with the eruption area covering a few thousand square kilometers. For instance, a supervolcanic eruption on the Indonesian island of Sumatra caused 6 years of sulfuric acid rains. Add to this the dust clouds blocking the sun for quite a while, and you will get a picture very similar to nuclear winter. The supervolcano left no more than 10,000 people on the entire planet. Nowadays, there's also a threat of volcano eruption. There is a supervolcano in Yellowstone National Park, USA, at the height of 2,500 meters. Until recently, it has been considered dormant. On the outside, Yellowstone National Park is covered with a picturesque landscape. Well, on the inside, it is a vast valley filled with molten magma. For thousands of years, magma has been filling huge underground reservoirs, melting rock, becoming so thick that volcanic gases causing eruptions in regular volcanoes can't escape. Thereby, upward pressure from gigantic subsurface molten magma bodies make the surface of the Earth begin to swell. 2006, the land in the park is found to be rising 10 centimeters per year. 4th of March 2014, the White House ordered the U.S. Geological Agency to restrict access to the information on earthquakes and gas emissions. March 2014, bisons and elks abandoned the park. April 2014, the water temperature in the lakes rose above 20 degrees Celsius. According to scientists, in case of explosion, the picture will be more dramatic than that of apocalypse.
Dios mío, Dios mío, Dios mío, Dios mío, Dios mío, Dios mío.
One thing that was happening is that you could not cross state lines at this time without papers. You had to have current papers to cross state lines. That was very, very strange to me.
Sobriety checkpoints. Thousands of motorists are stopped in them each year.
Good evening, man. How you doing?
Typically, drivers are asked to roll down the window and hand over ID, but more drivers are starting to challenge these DUI checkpoints.
I don't think I would have ever believed that our country would become a place where you can't cross border to border without papers.
Police DUI checkpoints like this one, motorists can simply communicate in writing. More than 2 million people have watched the video. It shows somewhat surprised officers in Levy County, Florida, look at a flyer and examine identification with the window up.
I have my fair DUI flyer.
The flyer says, "I remain silent, no searches, I want my lawyer," along with sections of the motor vehicle law.
Right about at the time that this earthquake hit, very unusual things began to happen with law. I began to see local municipalities, and no longer were police departments the enforcers of the law of municipalities, but military police driving very unusual looking vehicles that I now know to be called Humvees.
Covering St. Lucie County, police in Fort Pierce now have a new tool to fight criminals. They unveiled a U.S. surplus battle wagon. It's a 6-wheel, 30-ton armored vehicle worth $700,000. But get this, the agency only paid $2,000 for it. Officer Keith Holmes says it's a great addition.
This vehicle that I saw was black. They were on just about every corner of every main thoroughfare. Now, this system of these police was actually quite peaceful. They weren't rude, they weren't mean to people, they weren't obnoxious. I didn't see any looters or anybody getting shot or anything like that. They seemed to be peaceful, kind of parked at every corner. All I know is these guys were everywhere. Another thing I was able to see is I was able to look inside of here, and on the inside of there was a what I know now to be a laptop type of computer sitting on the dash with a computer screen that seemed to look much like the airplane I rode in today, a Canada Air regional jet that had all new digital GPS that just completely draws the picture for them so they follow without gauges. You could look into this computer and it would give them all sorts of information. It was canvas here, and there was a man standing in the back. They were wearing very unusual outfits, by the way. I saw street light standards, the kind like we have in California that really, you guys are still kind of old-fashioned out here. You have those wires that go across intersections with old lights hanging on. We have these huge standards that hang out. On the top of them, I began to see cameras, little white oval-looking, hot dog kind of looking cameras.
A surveillance program operating all around the Bay Area. Federal agents planting microphones to secretly record conversations. Can they legally do that?
Yes, they can, which may surprise a lot of you out there. Just imagine standing at that very bus stop, having a conversation with your friend, and having no idea that your conversation was being recorded. It happens all the time, and the FBI says that they don't even need a warrant to do it.
They plant microphones under rocks, they plant microphones in trees, they plant microphones in equipment. I mean, there's microphones that are planted in places that people don't think about because that's the intent.
FBI agents hid microphones inside these light fixtures and at this bus stop without a warrant.
And in the dream, it was revealed to me that these cameras knew the whereabouts of everybody's vehicles. And you know, they tell us, because people have been asking in California, hey, why do you have these cameras on the freeways? You've told us that they're for traffic control. But there's no streetlights on the freeways, folks. You know, you can drive from where I live clear down to San Diego on a freeway and never have a light. Why do they need those? And you think about it for a minute. These guys knew our whereabouts. They were parked on nearly every main thoroughfare.
Tonight, it'll make you ask, am I being watched? And we guarantee you'll be checking out your own neighborhood after you get the full story on this one.
But a man who lives in the house behind us says that he thinks there was a different kind of surveillance going on with some sort of mystery box attached to that power pole. SRP tells us that it looks like the box was from law enforcement, but they wouldn't elaborate.
This week we learned billboards may track wherever you go.
Just walking down the street may help advertisers now target you. Clear Channel Outdoor announced that it partnered with AT&T to track you on your cell phone. The company claims it's anonymous. Billboards will have technology that pings your cell phone location. Even driving by the billboard will trigger a device alerting the company where you go. The billboard tracking service launched in 11 cities and will be available across the country later this year. Privacy concerns extend beyond billboards. A major industry leader, Phase 6, sells this kind of software.
But here you can see that each of your members will be identified.
According to Phase 6, malls also use the software on shoppers, but the tracking could start the moment anyone enters the garage. Your smartphone is a great tool, but privacy advocates say that if companies can legally collect data on you, you should know where it goes, because cameras are everywhere, and you never know who's watching or following from your cell phone.
A new technology is now being actively tested by Microsoft, which takes this even further. It's called Real Crowd Insights, and it recognizes your emotions. It can show a whole range of the things you're feeling, from joy and calm to contempt and disgust.
More high-tech crime-fighting tools for our police is the latest election promise from Labor. The move will make catching crooks through CCTV even easier. But could it also impact on our privacy?
Tech companies are among the groups coming to Washington to help create the first voluntary guidelines.
Facial recognition is already in some of our home appliances, like TVs.
Hi, TV.
In our mobile devices, pins and passwords are giving way to face prints. And the technology can single us out in real time as we go about our daily business, often without us ever knowing.
Hang up the phone and now they can listen to everything you're saying. Do you know that your telephone, all your little phones have in them one of the most sensitive microphones available? Why? Why do telephones need such sensitive devices? And why have they so rapidly went to the new type of cables that carry all the signals? Can't think of what you call it right now. Somebody help me. Fiber optics. Do you know that one fiber optic cable can carry over 1 million messages? Why? Why do they do things like that? Think for a minute. So that more people can be kept watch after. Not so that telecommunications gets better for us. It's a game, folks. It's a big scheme. It's a big plan going on before us.
For journalists in this country, the realization that the government is spying on their communications is becoming more and more common. That's according to a new study from the Pew Research Center. It reports that nearly 7 in 10 journalists believe that the Obama administration has in fact spied on them. But where is the media pushback against all of this?
There was a very unusual event that happened. Television, telephone, radio, and this other unusual communication device I was able to see into many, many homes in the United States. These white boxes that were about this big that looked to be like televisions. And when I saw these, they were in nearly every single home in the U.S. and they would have words written across them, and occasionally it would almost look as though television was playing through them. In 1980 and 81, there was less than 0.5% of American homes that had a computer in it. I was on my way to conduct another business transaction, and I ran into an individual. A very strange thing happened at this point. He was very, very excited and began to talk to me about something he had just experienced. This man said to me, Ken, I introduced myself to him. He was very excited. He said, have you got your identification mark? And I said, I don't know what you mean. What's an identification mark? He says, they've just enacted a new identification mark. And by the way, this started with a voluntary implementation first. You did it voluntarily first. This man told me you ought to get yours done real soon to avoid the hassle, because soon everyone, they say, will have to have this to conduct business.
And finally this morning, no need to worry about forgetting your work ID with this development. A new office facility in Sweden is offering workers the option to have a microchip implanted to give them access to the building. Now, the chip is about the size of a grain of rice and would be implanted in the hand.
Cecilia Osterholm starts her day with this new technology. She swapped her keys for a chip in her hand that uses a radio signal to open doors.
A microchip, about the size of a grain of rice, is injected into her hand.
It felt pretty scary, but at the same time it felt very modern, very 2015.
Well, at this Kmart, there was a little, like about the size of this overhead tonight, about an 8.5 by 11 gray-colored pad with a hand sitting down on it. This pad, excuse me, I asked the lady, can you please tell me what this is all about? And she said, I'll have you know that they just recently put these in, and we're not exactly sure what is going to happen with them, because they didn't tell us everything. She said, but a supervisor told me that what they're planning to do is sometime in the future just have a person run their hand by, and that will take care of the scanning.
It's kind of crazy. It's definitely outside the box. But it's convenient.
One area of business is shaking up how we pay for things.
You don't need your phone, you don't need your keys, you don't need a scan card.
It's the first cash register of its kind in the Midwest, and it's right here in Rockford.
A lot of people don't want to bring in their wallets, don't want to bring in any cash.
Whitney Martin profiles how the future of credit cards is inside our hands.
Somebody might be here tonight that's seen these same handprints on these pads in some retail outlets. I've heard they've been seen in Walmarts.
Walmart was putting an electronic chip in some of its clothing items. Unless the customer removes the tag on their own, Walmart could determine the location of your clothes even after you leave the store. Jeans, some underwear, a lady's camisole.
It is a microchip that is implanted under the skin and can deliver tiny amounts of hormone, like a birth control pill.
We've seen retinal scans in airports. Now even some U.S. schools use them to speed up cafeteria lines.
I think it's good because it's really fast. The queues go quicker so that you don't have to spend all break queuing up for the food.
I began to witness to this lady, by the way. I wish I could have told you I led her to faith in Christ, but I wasn't. But I shook her to the core of her being. I told her some things about the Antichrist, about the mark of the beast.
The Antichrist and controlling of people. That's what it brought up. Second, yeah, the Antichrist. You know, you see these fictional movies and you see their implants and it controls you.
So, but I'll have you know that she got rattled. And about 2 weeks later, it was gone. And some people told me, yeah, we're seeing him come and go. It's kind of weird how it's happening.
At schools across the country, students aren't using cash or a card to buy lunch anymore. They're using these pulse scanners that basically take a photo of the vein pattern below the skin and deduct from that child's account.
That very strange thing happened to me with this man's hand, this agitation. I got very frightened, and something spoke inside of my stomach and said to me, get out of here as fast as you can. And I began to think, oh my goodness, it is the end of the world now. It is really the end of the world.
Where we shop in the store, what things we pick up are starting to be recorded and analyzed.
Tom Keenan of the Canadian Global Affairs Institute says biometric ID is advancing faster than our ability to contain it.
while I was running, I want to read to you what I heard in my spirit. I didn't know it was my spirit at that time. If you have a Bible, if you want to turn there tonight, I'll read very quickly from Revelation 13. I didn't know these were scriptures. I was hearing this inside of my stomach. Now, again, I didn't know what the stomach did at that time. Now I know that's where your spirit man lives. Out of your belly shall flow rivers of living water. He causes all, verse 16, chapter 13 of Revelations, He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, to receive a mark in their right hand or their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell, save he has the mark, the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of man. That number is 666, okay? Or, yeah, 666.
I think that within 20 years, when you get born, you will get a chip.
Parents are putting these chips in kids in Mexico, where there's a higher risk of kidnappings. The scanners are put up at airports and bus stations, so if a chipped child is there, police know.
One congressman said that Obamacare is the most dangerous piece of legislation ever passed. Ever. Spoken by young and old. Young and old. Rich and poor. Rich and poor. Rich and poor.
And He causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads.
I saw this man that was a very, very big man. I was sharing earlier in the tour that he was tall like a professional basketball player, but he was very big like a professional football player. He was an extremely large man, and he had a big hood, like a satin hood, over his head with eye holes to see out of. My wife was in front of me, and they began to tell her she could renounce her faith and live. And now I realized what was happening, because this man was standing there with a huge sword. It started down here with a handle and began to come up like this, and then like this, and then a big arch like this. And it was a very, very frightening looking sword.
ISIS released a new video today showing the execution of 21 Coptic Christians kidnapped in Libya. The video shows the Egyptian prisoners being marched onto a beach by militants dressed in black. Then the prisoners are beheaded brutally.
He was tall like a professional basketball player.
This video really marks ISIS on the world stage, well beyond the videos that we've seen in the past out of Syria and Iraq.
Cap that these guys were wearing and the sword that I saw this executioner holding. I just sat there and froze when I saw this sword. I didn't know how to take it.
Stranded on a notorious stretch of coast in New Zealand. Almost 200 pilot whales have beached themselves. Around 25 of the animals have already died, and more are expected.
Now at this point in the dream, things really began to shift. And what happened was, I was on my way to the bank to make a business transaction. Several things in the dream I was revealed. For one, let me see if I have something with me. Yeah, I do. I saw this money in 1980. I saw the money that has the big pictures of the different figures on it. In 1980, this money wasn't even talked about yet. Another thing I saw shortly after this money was that the picture of the individual moved over a little bit, and there was a blank space on here. And there was a blank space on here. And I was shown in the vision that the cash would carry bands in it that could be traced as to who was transacting the cash.
They've worked it out now, and it's a pretty high-tech piece of paper. Look at this part right down here. You see this little inkwell here in gold? There's a picture of a bell inside it in gold, which you really can't see very much, but this is color-shifting ink, so if you angle it somewhat, what you'll see is the bell pops out in green, so it changes, and so does this number right over here. That's one of the features. Ben Franklin's collar has very tiny writing on it here that says the United States of America along its edge. And right here, you see this ribbon that's woven through it? This is a 3D type of ribbon. It has the number 100 on it and more of these bells on it. When you move it, they change back and forth and they shift position. There's another ribbon embedded that glows with ultraviolet light. And let's look at the back of this for a minute, because this is pretty important too. On the back of it, you may notice that they have, I'll flip it over again. On the back of it, you notice a great big 100 down here, so people who are visually impaired can see it better. And down here, there's this blank space. That's actually containing a watermark of Benjamin Franklin. You can see if you hold it up to the light. You can't see it right now, but I'm told it looks a lot like this, sort of little glasses and a nose and a mouth. I'm not sure, but I think it looks sort of like that, Aaron. So that's the new bill. A lot of security features. That one's one of the more low-tech ones.
It's kind of amazing, just the technology that goes into a bill when you think about it.
Oh,
but,
my God.
I mean, how many of these are in circulation?
Well, you know, more than you might think. About 8.6 billion of them. They are, now this is something that may blow your mind a little bit here. You know the most popular bill in the country, the one that we use all the time, is the 1. The 100 is the most common one after the 1, and that's because this is loved all around the planet. In many, many places, $100 bills are used as sort of a de facto currency, even though here you don't see them on the street so much. A lot of businesses won't even take them, but they're enormously popular overseas as this common currency. So it's believed that somewhere between a half and 2/3 of all of the hundreds that we have are held in other countries. So how much is that, Aaron? That is about $430 billion worth, or enough that if you had all the hundreds from around the world, you could buy Apple.
You see, it's not just enough to know where your checking account goes and your electronic, say, Visa transactions. They want to know where you're spending cash, too, because it's the ultimate control issue. And I saw this. And you ask yourself a question if you think I'm incorrect tonight. Have you been able to go just to any local printer and say, for instance, Kinko's, I'd like you to print 500 of my checks up? Can't do it, folks. Your checks are banded with pertinent information so that your checks can be traced. All you have to do is put your checks under an ultraviolet light and you'll find this to be true. Checks are already being traced. They're already being tracked. I saw money that was being tracked. Yesterday, somebody sent us some information that the rainbow money is going to be in full effect by 2003. Right now, within the next month, they're going to release the 10s, 5s, and 1s for the new money. And I'm telling you, we're right on track. We're on a fast track, actually, with these events happening.
Having more than 7 days' worth of food is one of the criteria for being a terrorist. Having multiple weapons at home, anybody, we won't ask you to raise your hand. Likes to pay in cash.
Likes to pay in cash.
Checks are already being traced. They're already being tracked. I saw money that was being tracked. And I'm telling you, we're right on track. We're on a fast track, actually, with these events happening.
Has changed the color of your hair recently. We're not going to get too personal here. Stains on your clothing means you might be making bombs. Missing fingers. Anybody ever met a farmer who might be missing a finger?
A training program for law enforcement that's funded by the Department of Justice included the following potential terrorist indicators: keeps records on computers, near identified potential target carrying video cameras, person observed with maps, rental of self-storage space, presence of pamphlets, having hair dyes in your home. So I took to the streets to see if I could find anyone who met this criteria.
And I was shown in the vision that the cache would carry bands in it that could be traced as to who was transacting the cache.
Our government says if you meet these criteria, such as having a camera near a point of interest, like to pay in cash, has more than 7 days worth of food, you are a terrorist suspect. That's pretty scary.
Do you think we should look like terrorists?
So my freedoms and my patriotism were instantly being eroded from my understanding.
Because our rights contained in the Bill of Rights do not come from the Constitution. They come from God. It's clearly stated in the Declaration of Independence.
Our laws do not come from God, Your Honor, and you know that.
The law of this country calls it the organic law of our country, means where our rights come from. And if they come from there, men can't take them away.
Our rights do not come from God.
Listen to this one. This is going to have a whole bunch of you rolling your eyes this morning. There was a student at a Florida high school who was in trouble for simply saying, "God bless America," during the school's morning announcements.
Or something. It was a very rugged hand, and it was a very thick hand. It wasn't like mine. You know, I'm kind of a small boned person, but this was a very solid hand, and it gripped my shoulder, and warmth and peace began to flood through me. After a few moments, I turned back, and there was the Lord Jesus Christ standing behind me. I don't know how he got in that room, because it was just a small holding cell and the doors behind us were shut. And then all of a sudden, he looked me in the eyes. He looked at me very, very sternly. It wasn't like a reproof or conviction, but it was more of just him looking and peering into my life. And the most unusual thing occurred to me. At the very instant I looked at him, his eyes were not brown or green or blue or anything like that. They appeared to be red like fire, and they were just looking clearly through my whole life. Somehow at that moment, I was able to realize that him looking at me was actually looking through me, and he knew everything of me. He knew my strengths, he knew my weaknesses, he knew every lie deep down inside of me, he knew every deception, he knew every place that I was afraid and I had compartmentalized. My whole being, by him looking into me, was exposed to me. It was very frightening. It was a very intense moment. I wish I could say that seeing Jesus at that moment made me very happy. It didn't. It made me very fearful. I understand now what the fear of the Lord is because of that experience. I've had you want for me. It was a powerful manifestation of Jesus. It was not this "we're pals and buddies" kind of a thing. I did not see that. I saw him in his awesomeness, and when he looked through me, he knew everything about me. He knew every nook and cranny. And about a few moments after realizing this, realizing my own depravity, he spoke to me and he looked sternly into my eyes and he said, "Fear not, my son, for death will never hold you." This was unusual to me, and then instantly it was like a kind of a courage flooded through me. I wish I could tell you that I got very bold and preached a great sermon and got everybody saved, but I didn't. It was just courage to go through what was before me. And so these men strapped me down now, and this individual, by the way, before they strapped me down, they asked me one more time, "You can renounce him now." And I said, "No, he's the Lord of all." And I knew that he had saved me in the dream because of the prayer and the thing with that older man. But when I looked at him, I knew now, and I can tell you folks, I know for a certainty, he is the Lord of lords and the King of every king. Amen. And I'm telling you, where the scriptures say every knee will bow, every tongue will confess his lordship, whether in heaven, on earth, or under the earth. When I saw him, there is not one knee, there is not one tongue that will not confess his lordship, regardless of what side of the coin they are. When he reveals himself to them, every knee will bow. Trust me, because this presence that he stood in was so powerful, so awesome, so anointed, so terrible, so to speak, like the scriptures say, he's terrible in his presence. Terrible in the sense that you knew that there's no power on earth that could challenge him. Folks, I'm not afraid of nuclear bombs at all. I have no fear of nuclear disaster, because I know that the God of the universe that revealed himself to me is greater than any demonstration that man can concoct.
That's right. Amen.
The creator of heaven and earth gave us the wisdom to make those stupid bombs. He is not going to be outdone by his creation.
That's right. Amen.
And I saw that about him. And then they strapped me down and they said, you can renounce him. And I said, no, I can't renounce him, because he's the Lord of all. And he should be your Lord.
And then shall they see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. And when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh.